Back on Inside Tennessee, Robin is back, and Robin, one of the big races we've been talking about, Judge.
That's right. Tyler Cavaness taking on the incumbent, John Rawson, come November. So, gentlemen, were you surprised by just how close this race ended up being in the end?
Not really. I mean, honestly, to be honest with you, just because of how long Judge Rawson has been on the bench, I expected him to be a little bit higher in the total percentage. So it ended up a little tighter than I thought it would be in this first round, which I think, ring some alarm bells. I think might spell that Cavaness has a chance to come from behind in this general.
Well, in 36 or 38 years, this is only the second time that John Rawson's had to go to a general election. And I think in looking at this, the Ward and Beamer votes are largely going to go to Cavaness, and that would absolutely make the difference in defeating Judge Rawson. And they're both good people and Judge Rawson's done a good job. So, but he's worked hard. He may be in his 70s, but he doesn't slow down, and it's going to be a really close race. So
what is Tyler Cavaness going to have to do then?
Knock on a lot of doors, convince people that it's time for a change, that 36, 38 years is long enough. And he's new blood and ready to go. The other thing is, this is nonpartisan, and Eddie and I have talked about it. Tyler clearly is identified as a Democrat. Rawson largely has stayed independent, but he's got that picture with Donald Trump floating around the internet, and I don't think that's going to help him in the city.
And honestly, I think when you look at it, I think it's all about turnout. It's whichever one can turn their voters out, that's who's going to win, especially considering...
If they can just get their family out, unfortunately, with the numbers.
Pretty much, yes.
How much of a role do you think the endorsement from Gloria Johnson, Madeline Rogero, even Catherine Bike, the Democrat on school board, donated to him?
In the city, I think endorsements aren't necessarily what they're cracked up to be, but in the city, it made a difference. Those are three prominent, well-liked Democrats, and I think it made a difference.
And again, endorsements don't usually move the needle very much. If anything, maybe 1-2%.
That may be all we need.
But again, when you're talking such slim, small margins, 1 or 2% really is about 10 voters. It's not like it's a huge number when you're talking presidential race at 1 or 2%. So again, I think it's all about who's going to spend the time knocking on doors, talking to voters, and making sure those voters go vote in early voting or on election day.
It's always interesting to me, given technology, given pamphlets and everything that are constantly being in our mailboxes, it really does simply go back to door knocking and getting face-to-face with the voters. Let's talk about the races in general. It appeared to me, at least, that they weren't ugly. They were pretty
clean as politics go, particularly in East Tennessee. We've seen some dirty races. I think, just Eddie said it off air, I think the Parker Hill race is going to get a little snippier as we get closer, but I don't think the judge races are constrained by code of judicial ethics, so they usually don't get ugly. The last ugly race we had was many years ago for a criminal court bench, and but I don't think any of these races are going to get too nasty.
No, and what I appreciate about both the city and for, by and large, even the county, most of the time candidates are running based on policy. It doesn't get into the personal back and forth that you see on a lot of the state and federal races, and I hope it stays that way. It's really about what's going to be best for Knoxville and to move Knoxville forward.
Well, I'd argue those county races have gotten a little nastier in the past, but and again,
we're moving there.
We didn't have a close mayoral race, and so that's usually the bigger the race. Usually the more intense it can get.
Can we talk about that Tim Hill, Amelia Parker race and the amount of money that was spent in that race? Now, these are July numbers because we don't have the August numbers from Amelia Parker yet. But it shows she spent $8,460 in that last period. Tim Hill spent $54,461 at the same time.
And he has another $54,000 he can pull right out of his pocket and spend if he wants. It shows you money doesn't always work. It often does. Amelia Parker is a community activist, and it's a city race. If this were for county commission, I'd say those numbers would be reverse, at least reverse, and it'd be a different battle. But Amelia Parker is in this race, and I think she very well may defeat the money in the general.
And again, I can speak to someone who actually beat the money because it's all about the ground game. If Amelia's got an incredible ground game and Tim's relying on mail, digital, and television ads, that's not going to move voters. Getting out and knocking on the doors, honestly, you spend $54,000 on door knockers to go out for you, you're going to have a much better turnout than if you spend it on mail or TV.
And that's where Tyler Cavaness, by the way, he's got to knock on doors. John Rawson gets 150 voters every docket that come through his court, and he gets to talk to those people, and they go, oh, that was a nice judge, that was a nice guy, I'll remember him.
Have you seen two candidates more opposed than Tim Hill and Amelia Parker? One is a downtown developer. The other one is a boots-on-the-ground, affordable housing type of person.
Oh, I think we can all come up with examples of where they're more opposed. But in this community, it's quite the dichotomy. And again, it's reflective, frankly, of why Tim Hill, despite having the money and being known, at least in the developer community, why he's struggling, because Amelia Parker is a community activist in a blue community.
Let's look at, and we know this now, Debbie Helsley, 70%, garnering 70% of the vote. She is safe, it appears.
One would think, yes.
But one would think, that's right. Do you think that continues on into
I do. I think Marlowe has hurt himself, with that Facebook post from several years ago, but it came to light a few months ago, and that kind of gap. Debbie Helsley, she also made a name for herself in the Glenn Jacobs race to take on a very popular county mayor, international star, and to get as close as she did. She's got some political chops, and I think she's going to be on city council very soon.
I would agree with that. And again, I think when you go back and you look at, unlike the Tim Hill, Amelia Parker, people don't just completely dislike Debbie. I mean, she's a very likable person. So, you've got a baked-in kind of people who just don't like Amelia, unfortunately.
There was some say that about Tim as well as a developer.
But I mean, she's an incredibly nice woman. I mean, incredibly smart, has done a great job on city council. So I think when you just look at it, there's some baked in already against her vote. I don't feel that much is baked in against Debbie at this point. That might be different in 4 years, but right this minute, I think she's more of an enigma than the other candidates are.
When we come back, we'll talk about the ending to the special session with a former state representative.